Hit broadcast.
Okay, it looks like it is 12 o'clock and we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us again this morning. I want to take a quick moment and remind you that this Thursday we have Lee Brown finishing out her three-part series with us. And then next Monday, we've got Steve Harney with Keeping Current Matters coming in. You can find all of the registrations for these webinars as well as the archived sessions at the lirealtor.com/COVID page. I get the great privilege and honor of introducing this morning's speaker. Elliot Eisenberg, PhD, is an internationally acclaimed economist and one of the most fun and engaging public speakers out there. Dr. Eisenberg was formerly a senior economist with the National Association of Home Builders, and it wasn't in his official bio, but he also did some work with CMLS, the Council of MLSs, back in the day, and that's where I first encountered him when he was their economist and also one of their speakers. And then after that, I saw him a couple times as an NAR keynote. He is the creator of the Multifamily Stock Index, which is the first nationally recognized index to track the total return of public firms principally involved in the ownership and management of apartments. He serves as serves on the expert advisory board of the Mortgage Market Guide. He's a regular consultant to several large real estate professional associations, financial institutions, investment and advisory groups, and occasionally AEs with a lot of questions. He has a daily microblog, which is one of my favorite things to do. I love getting it every morning and I recommend it to everybody. And I believe he is going to show you how to register for that at the end of this. It is well worth it. Every morning you get just a couple of sentences on a topic. It is fantastic. It is my great privilege and honor to bring you Dr. Elliot Eisenberg. Thank you, Elliot.
Thank you for that, wow, luxurious and beautiful welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for signing in for this. Will be a somewhat difficult to hear economic forecast. I want to position it before we get into the details. We're going to suffer, or we're already in, an extremely deep recession. The saving grace is it will be very, very short. Last recession was 18 months. This one will be probably 5 or 6 months at most. But it will be incredibly deep, but the government is throwing everything at the problem, and the virus will go away. We're already seeing some data over the last couple of days. Italy's numbers are better. Maybe New York's numbers are peaking. Spain's numbers, maybe. I mean, this will go away. And when it goes away, we open up, go back to work, and the economy begins to improve. So don't confuse the depth of this with the duration. It's very deep, but it's very short. This is a very unusual and very different recession. Let's begin by looking at GDP. And GDP is composed of 4 terms: household consumption, corporate investment I, government spending G, and net exports X. And what's happening is C, household consumption has been absolutely crushed. It's being crushed because we can't leave our house. We can't go to restaurants. We can't go on trips. We can't go to hotels. We can't go to Disneyland, Disney World, whatever it is. We can't do a lot of stuff. So transportation, leisure and hospitality, retail, beverage, all that stuff, food and beverage, zero. It's killing the economy. Corporate investment in plant and equipment is not doing particularly well because firms aren't going to invest at a time like this. It's not going to happen. It was already weak before the recession began. It's going to get weaker. But government spending, gee, is going to ride to the rescue on a big, strong horse, right? They're going to spend trillions of dollars trying to get us through this 2 or 3 month period so that when we get back to work, we haven't defaulted on our car payments and our house payments and our mortgage payments and our rent payments. And businesses can reconstitute relatively quickly because they've been able to hold on to their employees, or that's the plan. Now let's exports, last term exports minus imports, that's not going anywhere. Our trade deficit actually improved, but it improved because imports fell a bit. Exports fell a bit and imports collapsed. So it got better, but it's worse because there's less employment and so on. Let's look at the virus. The US is in red, it's close to the top. It's beginning to slow down. Now there are other hot spots out there. There's Detroit's a hot spot, Miami's a hot spot, Colorado's now a bit of a hot spot, coming from all the ski resorts where all the Chinese tourists came originally back in December and January when no one knew about this and so on. But it's going to go away. Once you get serious, and we got serious in mid-March, by the end of April, it should largely be gone with maybe a pocket or two, and we can slowly begin to open up the economy May 1st, May 15th, May 10th. I'm not an expert, I'm not an epidemiologist, but there's a process here. There really is. Once you isolate, the problem goes away. We need to see, and we're starting to see, improvement in the isolation numbers and the testing numbers, and that's going to make it better. It really will. And the reason our economy is so dismal, so utterly dismal, is because of the lockdown. In this graph, you can see most of the country, with the exception of the midsection of the country, from North Dakota all the way pretty much through Texas, I guess with the exception of Kansas, on that row of states in the dead center, everyone's on lockdown. There are a couple other ones. South Carolina's not on lockdown, and Wyoming and so on, and Utah. Iowa has no rules at all, the Dakotas and Nebraska, but you get the idea. These are some very rural states with very low population densities. They think they can get away without it. Good for them. I hope they're right. It'd be good for our economy if everyone doesn't have to close down. But the fact that New York is closed down, Illinois is closed down, Florida is closed down, California is closed down. These are the biggest states, 4 of the 5 biggest states in the country. We're just not simply spending anything. And this is doing incredible amounts of daily damage to our economy. Again, the lockdown stops, things improve. And that's what will happen. So again, we've never seen a decline like this, and we will have never seen a recovery like this either. The news is terrible right now, but it gets remarkably better relatively quickly. Not as quickly as we'd like it, and improvement's not going to be as fast as a decline, but there'll be certainly improvement. And to give you an inkling of how quickly this has come upon us, if you look at this graph about a month ago, and end of February, early March, expectations were US GDP in 2020 would be about 2%. And then you can see as the weeks progressed in the month, suddenly GDP growth goes to 0, goes to -2, -3, whatever. As we learn more about coronavirus and how dangerous it is, and how much we're going to have to do to fight it and close down our economy, expectations for growth completely evaporated. That brings us to the next slide. And this is telling us, this is giving you an idea of what different places that make predictions about economic growth are telling us about Q2. And you can see the expectations for Q2 range from just a terrible -9% to the incredibly, incomprehensibly atrocious -40. If I had to make a guess right now, based on everything I know and things I don't know, and there's a lot we don't know, I would guess this decline is going to be in the upper 20%. This is staggering. We've never seen anything like this ever. And the saving grace is government intervention, and it will end relatively quickly. That's the critical. This is not going to hang around at -25. It won't. I promise you. We can argue how fast the recovery is, but we can't argue that there'll be a good, solid recovery that will make up for this loss. Whether it takes us 6 months or 12 or 18 is something else, but there'll be a strong recovery and a very short recession, but of a very, very deep magnitude. That's the point that I'm trying to drive home. And here are a couple different forecasts of what's likely to happen.
No one really knows here what's going to happen because we've never seen it before. And if someone says, well, based on your experience in the past, what do you know? The answer really is nothing. We don't know how long the coronavirus will last. We don't know how deep the damage really will be. You saw the expectations of between -10 and -40. That's a pretty broad spectrum. The way to think about this recession is kind of like a hurricane. Think of Hurricane Sandy, for example. It did immense economic damage, two types of damage. One, it destroyed things. That's not happening here, and that makes the recovery much easier because we just go back to our factory and start working again, right? But for a couple of days or weeks, nothing happened. That's what's happening now, but all over the country. Unprecedented, right? The magnitude of the damage and the duration. So this is a hurricane that lasts across the country for a month and a half. This is really unbelievable. So in this particular case, these groups are forecasting a strong big down in Q2, a mild Q3, and then a really great Q4, right? Here's another forecast put up by Goldman Sachs. They see a precipitous decline in Q2, a really strong recovery, but not as strong in Q3, and then good growth going out into the horizon. So a somewhat different perspective. If you ask me what I see how it's looking like, I see a very steep decline, almost 30% on the downswing in Q2. And then we'll be low there for a couple of months. So April is the first month in Q2. So June, second half of May, June, we kind of get our footing. We stop getting worse. July maybe, and then August, September, we start to go up. So Q1 will be bad, -5%. Q2 will be horrible, -30, almost -30. Q3 will be negative again because the first month or two in the quarter, July, will be bad. Part of August will be bad. But then second half of August, September, things noticeably begin to improve, and Q4 gets better. That's my own personal assumption. Again, no one really knows how this will go, but you see all these forecasts, everybody thinks that we get out of this relatively quickly, and by Q3 we're better, or Q4 we're much better, or whatever it is. But this is a short thing. Don't get depressed by the magnitude of the decline. That will not be helpful to you in thinking about what's going to happen. This is an artificial decline here. Remember, in the last recession, it went bad because people couldn't spend any money. Up until end of February or early March, people were happy to spend money. We just can't go out and do anything with the money except buy something on Amazon or Wayfair or Chewy. There's nowhere else to go, right? So that's why we're being held in our houses against our will, if you will. We can't go to work, we can't spend. That's why we're having this dramatic decline that's unprecedented, because we've never had. The Hurricane Sandy was, think of that, or a tornado or a typhoon in the south, or a hurricane in Florida or Texas or something like that. These are you don't have them countrywide. That's the point. But we get out of this. If you look at consumer sentiments, not much to look at here. The decline here is really profound. You can see it's fallen by 30, 40%, and it will fall by more. This was through late March, but the last week of March was terrible, and April will be just as bad as the last couple of weeks of March. But then it begins to improve. We can argue how much, we can argue how quickly. But most of the damage to our economy will have been done by early to mid-May. And then we flatten out, and then we begin to slowly improve. It may take a while. Remember, you can turn off a company by turning out the lights and walking out the door. To reconstitute the company, whatever it is, takes longer. You've got to get inventory, you got to hire workers, you got to rebuild relationships with suppliers. Not all suppliers are going to be around. Some of them have gone under, some of them have new employees. You have to make new relationships with new vendors. This takes time. That's why this isn't going to happen instant. The improvement's not going to be V-shaped. It will be down, low, and then like a check mark recovery. Not like this, but like that. It'll be good. It'll be good enough. It'll be fine. It really will. But consumer sentiment, I see what's driving consumer sentiment, nothing to write home about. Here's another view of consumer sentiment. Different surveys, different company, but you get the point. There's not a lot of consumer happiness out there. People are nervous, people are scared, and they're not going to be spending large sums of money in the short run. They're going to want to hold on to their cash and make sure they can pay for food and clothes and rent and whatever else that's absolutely essential. This is another survey that we're more familiar with perhaps than the other two that I showed you, Ipsos and so on. This one shows certainly the decline. The latest number is the worst number it's been in 3 or 4 years, and next month will be worse. That's the point. We're just getting started here because the first half of March was fine. The second half of March was awful, and all of April will be like the second half of March because we're all sheltering in place, right? So the economic damage is severe here. It really is. Here, this is another example. Is it contained just to the US? No, it's not contained here. It's in Germany and Japan. China is now coming out of it. They're through it. But we're not so fortunate. We're not through it. That's the point here, right? So this is gonna take its toll on us, but it's blessedly going to be short. Consumer sentiment will be terrible, but only in the very short run. But you can see the numbers in Germany, and they're performing actually among the best, if not the best, in all of Europe for a whole bunch of odd reasons. But they're doing well, and yet consumer sentiment there is just awful. Look at hotel occupancy rates. We don't travel, right? We don't go on airplanes. We don't hold meetings. There are no conventions being held, no sporting events, no Disneyland, no Disney World. And as a result of this, hotel occupancy numbers are terrible. If you look just below the words hotel occupancy rates absolutely plummet, you can see the percentage declines. The actual year-over-year occupancy, like what it's fallen by 67, 68%. The rate per room, what's the dollar rate per room, has fallen 40%. But that masks the problem because the RevPAR, or revenue per available room, is down 80%. That means more rooms are vacant and the price per room is down. It's just a really, really bad combination. But this is getting to why consumer sentiment is bad and why GDP decline has been so precipitous. Look at this graph. You've never seen anything like it. You think 9/11 was bad. That was terrible, but it was much shorter duration. This has just begun. We've got another 3 or 4 weeks till the end of April, at least maybe an added week or two. I don't know. I hope not, but maybe will be possible. Depends how fast the coronavirus travels through our economy, herd immunity improves, a resistance gets developed, not a vaccine, but a program to deal with people who are sick and all that kind of stuff. Here's air travel data. Again, sure, during 9/11, there was no air travel for, 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever it was, 3 or 4 days, I think. But then it comes back. It didn't come back super strong right away, but it came back. Here we're going to have this prolonged situation where all these tarmacs are holding airplanes and so on. All these people lose their jobs. They in turn don't spend and so on. So the ripple effects here are pretty powerful. That's why the decline in GDP will be unimaginable, somewhere between 10 and 40%. I think closer to -30. Huge numbers. I can't stress this enough. We've never lived through anything like this in our lives, and we will remember this the rest of our lives. This will be a seminal event for everybody, especially the youngsters who are 15, 20, 25. This is the first thing that they probably consciously really remember well, right? Movie ticket sales. This data is already 10 days old. It's probably gone more closer to 10 or 20% of activity as opposed to roughly maybe a third of activity. Because there are some states that still aren't locked down, and some people a little bit, but movie AMC's declaring bankruptcy and so on because they have no cash flow. They can't survive. They can't pay their bills, pay the mortgage, pay the rent, whatever it is, pay their bond interest and so on. Restaurant traffic. What restaurant traffic? There isn't any restaurant traffic. This is really unprecedented. It really is unprecedented. Restaurants are closed, people can't get jobs and so on and so forth. And this is really, you hear me saying plummet, decline, crash, crushed. These are the appropriate adjectives to use. But again, the key thing is not to dwell on how bad it is, but that in 4 weeks or so, maybe 5, maybe 6 at most, we're out of this. And then suddenly things begin to level off and then they begin to improve. And they'll improve for sure because we want to go out and do things. We want to shop and go out to eat and buy a bottle of wine and have a nice evening sitting outside and enjoying a nice dinner or something. Auto sales, they're certainly declining. This is data for the US for the first half of March for 6 or 7 large cities. Detroit, for some reason, was doing particularly well. I think that's part of the reason now they're a relative hotspot because they weren't being contained enough and they weren't being given the message to just hold off. But maybe not. Maybe I speak too quickly. But you can see the data for the first half of the month was really pretty awful. And that was before we were in lockdown. Then we were just watching the stock market decline and our 401ks go to 201ks. And our belief that we're never going to retire, and we've just lost $100,000 or $200,000 like that in our 401ks, and we say maybe not make a big ticket purchase item. And outside of a house, the car is the biggest ticket purchase item households make, except for some very wealthy households, right? So this data only gets worse, and sure enough, you're right, it gets worse. Look at this. This shows us all vehicle sales, and you can see it peaks out about 17 million sales in 2016, slowly declines by 100,000 units a year, very mild decline, very mild decline. And then last month, kaboom, it goes from 17 million almost to 11.5 million or 11.3 million. That's a decline of a third. It took place in the whole month. The first half of the month, as we see in this slide here, again, quite poor. But the second half of March was worse, and April will be as bad as the second half of March because no one's going anywhere. Why you buy a car now? There's nowhere to drive. Why would you do it? It's just going to depreciate in your front lawn, right? That's just pointless. Unless your car broke and you have to go pick up your family or something. There's no reason to buy a car right now. There's nowhere to go. So car sales are bad, and this is a harbinger for housing sales, right? Because if you're not spending $30,000 or $40,000 on a car, you're not going to spend $300,000 or $400,000 on a house. Or on Long Island, more like 6 or 7 or whatever the number is, right? So this is not a good sign. But on the upside, marijuana sales rock. This is, I guess, a case of we're at home, we're bored, we're with our family too much, and we're drinking booze and we're smoking pot. But that's not enough to help the economy. The marijuana industry is just too small. If you look at total of the first term in GDP household consumption, it's weak. Last recession, as you see the gray bar just to the left of center here, what you see there is that it declined by about 3%, almost 3%. And GDP declined by 4, almost 5%. This time we're going to see much steeper declines in consumption, personal consumption. We'll see declines of 20% easily. This is an order of, not 2 like last time, but add a 0, 20, 10 times as bad. Household consumption is awful. In terms of corporate investments in plant and equipment, the second term in GDP, look, business sentiment is lousy. And this was earlier in the month. This was through mid-month. It gets worse in the second half of the month. So business sentiment declines further. Why on earth are you going to invest in a plant? Are you going to build something now? Are you going to invest in a new building now? I mean, you may want to because you've got, you have intestines of steel, you know it's a good value, but you're not going to do it because you think your business is going to improve. You don't know when you're going to open, how many clients you're going to have, what kind of fundamental transformation to your business will have occurred because of this coronavirus, telemedicine, working from home. Things are going to change to some extent here too. Office buildings, I think, aren't going to be quite as valuable as they were because no one's going to have to go to work anymore. We'll work from home because our boss telling us you can't work from home because it doesn't work is no longer an acceptable response. People saying, I don't want to go see a doctor electronically, they're now going to say, hey, it worked then. I don't want to have someone deliver my groceries, but now they will. So until we know a little bit better about what's going on, corporate investments in plant and equipment is certainly going to be somewhat rattled, I think, right? Look at US rig counts. They had just begun to level off in late 19 and early 20 at the 660, 670 range. And then a precipitous decline now. And now we're in free fall again because oil prices have completely collapsed. They've completely collapsed because of this crazy war between the Russians and the Saudis. And they're flooding the market with supply, boosting supply by 3 or 4 million barrels a day, which is bad. But now, because we're all locked down here and in Europe and Japan and so on, total demand for oil has fallen by about 20 million barrels a day, from roughly 100 million barrels to 80 million barrels. So the last thing we need is now bigger supply. This is unprecedented. We have a once-in-a-generation increase in supply because of the war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. But we have a once-in-a-lifetime decline in demand, all meeting at the same time, doing immense damage to U.S. oil production. And this matters. Because even though consumers benefit from lower oil prices, we're not driving anywhere. So it doesn't even help us that gas is now in some parts of Kentucky and Ohio under $1 a gallon. Right? This is amazingly cheap oil, but we're not consuming it because we have no job. So all the oil producers and the guys that help the oil production, the oil service companies, and the firms like United States Steel that make the piping that goes into the drilling and so on, they're all doing badly. At this price, our economy is hurt, not helped by the low price of oil, hurting corporate investment. And when oil prices do well, there's a tremendous amount of investment. The oil industry matters a lot to GDP growth and productivity. It's amazing. It's a small industry, but it's very capital intensive, and it makes and thus very expensive. In this graph here, you can see the global demand for oil compared to compared to two different companies. Very weak, and you compare different quarters. This quarter it's down a lot. 5%. It is 100 million barrels, so every 1% is a million barrels. So down 5, 6, 7%, or 5, 6, 7 million barrels. Second quarter down 15%. I think it's even down more like 20%. These are really unprecedented declines. There's no investment in oil at all in our economy. And our economy almost went into recession back in 15, 16 when oil prices collapsed. That almost single-handedly brought us into recession, but didn't. This time, the oil price problems alone might bring us into recession all by itself. Of course, we're in recession because of everything else. And you can look here at the price of oil. The price of oil has fallen unbelievably. We're at $20. Okay, now it's 23 or 24. Depends what the Saudis and Russians do, and they'll make a deal. They have to make a deal, because if they don't make a deal, we'll run out of storage facilities. And when you run out of storage facilities, oil that comes out of the ground is worthless because there's nowhere to put it. So they have to make a deal. Someone's going to blink, or they'll both agree to blink at the same time. But they're going to blink because they have oil tankers just floating out in the ocean full of oil, going nowhere because nobody wants the oil. It's unbelievable. Corporate profits, again, are firms going to invest in plant and equipment when their profits are nosediving like an anvil? I really don't think so. So firms aren't going to invest because oil prices are low, because consumer expectations are bad, because corporate profit expectations are crummy. And financing is getting harder too. The central bank has done a lot to help liquidity in the system, no question. But oil firms are going bankrupt left, right, and center, and other firms will follow. There's no question. These oil firms don't need to be bailed out. Their business model just isn't all that great. But in some cases, decent firms will have a hard time too. I draw your attention here to the BBB, the big gray spot here, and how big it is compared to what it was 15 years ago in 2005. The amount of gray on this chart is unbelievably large. BBB debt is just above, this is investment grade level, for example. BBB is the lowest grade you can have and still be above investment grade. And what happens is, as conditions worse, this stuff begins to get downgraded. And sure enough, that's what's happened. If you look in the far right of this graph, the purple, that's downgrades from BBB, which is the lowest grade of investment grade, to junk or high yield bonds. And once they hit high yield status, a lot of places can no longer invest in it, which means the yields, interest rates go up because demand goes down, making financing that much more difficult. So the central bank is going to step in here and help, and they are helping already, but they can't help everybody. There'll be bankruptcies, and that's just the way it is. And those firms won't be able to reconstitute. You'll need a new firm to come into that space and build a new restaurant or a new Kinko's or a new UPS or whatever it is, big, small, more likely smaller than bigger. The big ones will probably survive, but the small ones and the poorly capitalized ones won't. And that's going to take our economy longer to recover. You're not going to get the V. You're going to get more like the check mark, right? In terms of manufacturing activity itself, the yellow line and the blue line include data for March. The red line only has February. You can see the yellow and the blue nosedive down. Manufacturing is back in recession. It had just gotten out in like December, Jan, Feb. Manufacturing here in the US had recovered a bit, and now they're jumping back into recession. That's just the way it is, because what are you buying? You're not buying much. You're buying masks, coat, N95 masks, and maybe a shield or something. But we're not really buying. We're buying a lot of food, but we're not buying a lot of stuff, right? Not happening. Fact utilization rates here is how intensively are you using your factory. Well, it was declining for a year and a half before the recession began. Again, firms aren't going to be investing in plant and equipment. Investment, corporate investment ain't going anywhere. It just isn't. Capital goods orders, so are we buying stuff? Are we buying plant equipment? No. Are we equipment plant? No. This is equipment. Are we buying equipment? No, we're not buying equipment either. Firms are hanging on for dear life. They want to try and get that money from the government, the SBA loans, if they're small, hold on to their employees, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, whatever it is, but they're not going to be investing in equipment at all in the short run, causing GDP to go down more. See, household consumption's bad, corporate investment's getting worse, right? But I am very optimistic that the recession will be short and the recovery will be strong, strongish, how strong, not V, but it will be a here, 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 or there. It doesn't really matter. Those are all good numbers. Whatever it is fine. As long as it's not that, we're fine. And it's going to do well because of this slide. The government's pushed trillions of dollars into the economy. They did a phase 1 for 8 billion, a phase 2 for 50 billion, and a phase 3 for 2 trillion or 2.2 trillion, including 450 billion for the central bank to help them lend against good collateral. So the central bank's going to lend trillions off that 450 billion, maybe 10 to 1, against good collateral. They'll lend a ton. There'll be trillions of dollars circulating through our economy. Unemployed people are going to get longer unemployment benefits and higher unemployment benefits, right? Bigger companies are going to get help. Airlines are going to get help. All Americans who make under 100,000, roughly under 75, are going to get a check. That's not going to help a lot in Long Island, but you get the point. There's help for hospitals. There's all kinds of help coming. This is preventing the economy from free fall and massive discombobulation that hurts us on the recovery. This will mitigate the problems such that when the recovery comes after we've sort of bottom out in May, June, and start to improve in maybe July, the slope is pretty decent. Absent this money, it might be like a real L-shaped recovery or no recovery because it's L-shaped. Now we're going to get this or this or this. Okay, this is okay, not as fast as the down, but it'll still be pretty good. That's the important thing. The budget deficit's going to get much worse, but just don't worry about it. There's no point. We need to do this because monetary policy on the interest rate side's done, brought down to 0, and we now need massive fiscal stimulus. It's the appropriate thing, and interest rates are much lower, so servicing costs aren't a problem, so don't worry about this, right? In terms of rail traffic, you can compare 18, 19, and 20. 20 is remarkably low, and 18 and 19 weren't good years. They were already bad because energy prices were low and commodity prices were low, so there was much less rail traffic here. This is intermodal rail traffic. This is the moving of manufactured goods in boxes, little boxes, into big containers. And you can see here, 18 here was the peak. 19 was lower, 20 is much lower. Clearly, the damage to our economy is profound. The key thing, as I keep saying over and over again, is it's going to be short. That's the mitigating factor. And in the middle of this, we still have the trade war. Tariffs are higher. This is dampening GDP growth a little bit, not much anymore. And the US dollar is remarkably strong. Because everybody wants dollars. In these moments of stress, fear, and terror, the world wants dollars. They sell gold, they'll sell stock, they'll sell their own currencies, they'll sell their own stocks in Germany and Japan. They want dollars. The central bank has made an infinite amount of dollars available to all kinds of arrangements with other banks and other central banks, other countries. So the demand for dollars should go down as the world is aware that there's an infinite supply of them available. The central bank, to their credit, has done everything they can. And the Congress, they really have. Now, this slide shows you the precipitous decline in our economic situation. If you look at this graph prior to the most recent vertical decline in the GDP, if you look to the far left, that was the last recession. The number hit -4, and it took a little while to get there. I tell people in this looking at this measure, if it gets to -1, the chances of a recession are very, very high. No guarantees, but very high. We're at -9. This is unprecedented. Here's another measure of economic conditions put up by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. This one here, the prior slide, shows that we're much worse than the last recession of 08 or 09 in terms of the decline, not the terms of duration. No, just the decline. This one shows it's a little bit worse, or roughly the same as the Great Recession of 2008, but it'll get worse because this doesn't have all the data. This doesn't have April in it, right? This just has most of March. And this slide tells us visually the magnitude of this decline compared to normal economic history. You look at the last 5 years of economic data, and then you compare it to this one. This one's 12 standard deviations away from the norm. This is 99.99999% unlikely to happen, yet it happened. Unprecedented, but as I said earlier, it's going to be short. This recession will last 2 quarters. It won't last longer. March, April, May, June, July, August, those 6 months at most. March, April, May, that may be it. Maybe in June we begin to sort of flatten out, in July we improve. It may even be 4 months, but 2 quarters, right? This will be steep and deep, but short, because of all the improvements that the government is doing in fiscal and monetary policy. And when we're allowed out of our house, we'll start spending. That's what's going to happen. So that's the saving grace, massive fiscal and monetary stimulus, and this is a natural end to it when we get out of our house. Now, let's talk about labor markets. Wow, labor markets were spectacularly good. They were unbelievably good. We were breaking records every month in the longevity and strength and durability of the housing market that we were experiencing. And then it all went into the garbage can in 2 weeks. It's unbelievable. This shows us first-time claims for mortgage applications. And last week, it showed 6.6 million people applying for unemployment. The data I'm showing you here goes back to the late 60s. It's 50 years of data. The prior worst week ever was about 700,000 back in 81, 82, just to the left of century on the graph. This number last week was 10 times as bad. That goes back to that 12 standard deviations. We've never seen anything like this. So it's hard to draw any comparisons from any prior economic history because we don't know the length and depth and breadth of the coronavirus. We don't know if Congress will stimulate more. We don't know how successful the stimulus has been. We don't know how many firms will disappear. Therefore, we don't know how fast the recovery will be. We just don't know. We know, a hurricane here or a tornado there, we know what that does to the macroeconomic data, virtually nothing. But when this sits here for 6 weeks over the whole country, it will cause immense damage. Short term, but immense, right? So labor markets, is duration, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Oops, I'm sorry. Labor markets, here's another sign of labor market data. This is unemployment rates in red and first-time claims in blue. But here I've dampened first-time claims by looking at a 4-week moving average. So this number here, the 2.5 million on the far right where the arrow is, includes the first couple of weeks of March, which were really very good, and even the last week of Feb, and you can see how high it is. And look at prior situations where blue goes up. When blue goes up and hits a spike, red jumps. So red's going to jump. We're going to have unemployment rates of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20%. But again, short. So you're going to tell people the data we're going to experience in April, the number of deaths from corona, the number of cases of corona in April are going to peak. The unemployment rate's going to peak. GDP is going to collapse. I mean, there's nothing good here, but it ends. And it ends quickly, and then it begins to recover solidly and nicely. And that's the important part. Now, let's talk about inflation. There isn't any inflation. There wasn't any before this began, and now the oil price collapse is making sure there's not going to be any inflation, right? As we recover, there could be some bottlenecks here and there when we need a certain part for our cars, or we need something for whatever. There'll be obviously some discontinuities and some messes here and there, right? But there's not much inflation. As a result, Congress and the Treasury can borrow vast amounts of money and not worry about interest costs and the impact of the debt and deficit on the economy. Right now, it's fine. It really is. I mean, down the road, at some point, we've got to cut spending and raise taxes. We can't do this forever. But in the short run, no problems at all. None. This is a CPI, what you think of as inflation. Blue is headline inflation. Red, that's much more dampened, is core inflation, no food and energy. And you can see, over the course of a year, they're the same. But blue bounces around because of wars and droughts, right? But red doesn't affect that because food and energy isn't there. And you can see there's no glass. Look at the last couple of years. It goes up and down like this, but there's no trend going on. There's nothing like inflation. This is the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, personal consumption expenditure inflation. The weights are different than the CPI, and they change a little bit. It's a little different. But again, look at red, look at blue. Do you see a trend? No, there's no inflation here. Europe, Japan, Canada, Australia, the UK, China, nothing. So the fear of inflation running rampant, I simply don't see it. For 12 years, we've had no inflation. It's not going to come. As for interest rates, they're as low as they're going to get as far as the Fed's concerned because they promised us no negative rates. First, here's a graph that's really important. What it shows us is the taller the Fed chair is, the higher rates are or were. Paul Volcker on the far left was 6'8", rates were high. Greenspan was shorter, then Bernanke, then Yellen, then Powell. Powell was taller and rates went up. And then, of course, rates have come down. He raised them up for a while, and then he's dropped them. Now they're at zero again. This is my very best case scenario. If everything is puppy dogs and kittens, Maybe next year they raise rates 0.5%. And the following year, maybe they raise rates 0.5%. So over the course of the next almost 3 years, maybe rates go up 1%. There's nothing going to happen. We're going to be licking our wounds. We're going to be getting ourselves better. And the economy will not be able to withstand an interest rate hike. You want cars to sell? You want homes to move? Then you better keep interest rates on the low side, because our economy just can't. Remember, Powell tried to raise rates too much in late 18. He raised rates once or twice too much. Therefore, in mid-19, he walked back those interest rate hikes because he saw the economy couldn't take it. Our economy is a slow-growing economy. We're older population. We take less risk. We can't stand high rates. Rates aren't going to go anywhere. In terms of housing, what's the story? We already had a prelude to it with auto sales. If auto sales aren't good, it's very hard to see. If auto sales are plummeting, it's hard to see housing sales doing well. It's hard for someone to say, oh my God, what a terrible time to buy a car and spend $40,000, but a great time to buy a house. I mean, look, some people are going to do that. They're going to see value in discounts in home prices. I don't think we're going to see a lot of discounts in home prices. Sellers aren't stupid. Sellers know, their real estate agents are telling them that, look, this is a short-term problem. There are no showings going on. How can you sell your house? You can't sell your house. There's no one to look at it. I mean, yes, there are various applications and robots and virtual showings, I understand, but you get my point. It's hard to see it. Copper prices are in the ground. Copper is important because all construction requires copper. Build new homes, build new office buildings, economic activity. It's a good indicator of economic activity. Now, in part, this is due to China. They buy more copper than anybody. But when copper's down, you're not going to have a strong economy. It's just not going to happen. No way, right? This is first-time mortgage applications. And you can see it's been on a relatively nice, steady, slow improvement since about January of 2015. It bounces around, but it's been doing pretty well until the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, it's plummeted such that now, year over year, first-time mortgage apps are down 24%. I think it gets a little worse because this didn't capture all of the last week of March, right? You pick up the last week of March, it's going to be even worse. And April will look much like March did because there's nothing happening. We're all in lockdown. So if home sales fall 30 or 40% in the short run, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Not in the slightest, right? Now, to take the same 24% decline and change how we think about it, look at this graph. Same data. Now we're looking at instead of looking at every year, I don't know, in a straight line going like this, in a line, we're putting 1 year on top of the other. And you can see the blue decline for the latest 24% decline. This is bringing us back to the economic activity, the purchase application activity that was out there in 2013. And this may well get a little bit worse as our economic activity in Q2 gets really horrible because of April and maybe the first week or two of May if we're still in our homes. But then it turns around. So people have a house on the market right now, they're not happy campers. Just tell them essentially to hold on. You want to lower the price a bit or take it off the market? Yeah, fine. But there's no reason to take a fire sale unless you have to move for some reason. You must get that money out for some reason. Or if they can at all wait, have them wait because things will improve and people can get out of their house and look for a new home to buy or a home to buy. Right? This is important. In terms of prices, I don't see much of them. If you look at the last recession of 08, 09, you see price declines of 20% nationally on average. But that's different. That recession was caused by the housing market. That was the epicenter of the decline. This time, housing is just collateral damage, like everything else. So are we going to see booming housing sales? No. Are we going to see declines? We talked about that, yes. Are we going to see price declines? A little bit. I mean, has booze gotten much cheaper? No. You're just not going to sell much booze now. Has food gotten cheaper? No. Sellers know that the economy is going to improve in 6, 7 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. And if they can wait and hold off and sustain the carrying cost of the vacant home, they'll be okay, right? They have to sell, but there's not a lot of buyers out there. Is there a real market out there? Is there a real clear market? It doesn't look that way, right? So I don't see big declines. In terms of refi activity, there's immense amounts of refi activity. I mean, a staggering amount of refi activity. And this will slowly burn itself out as everybody refis, right? They refi down to this lower interest rate. This massive refi wave slowly goes away. This doesn't help new. As a matter of fact, it actually will maybe, because the mortgage lenders are so busy right now with refi. They're swamped. So as the refi wave goes away, they'll have more time to devote to first-time buyers. The market will improve, and so on and so forth. In terms of defaults of existing homes, this is Fannie and Freddie's delinquency numbers. They kind of troughed out at the end of February. That was as good as they got. They were within 5 or 10 basis points, so a 20th of a percent or a 10th of a percent of their all-time lows back in 2004, 5, 6, 7. It bounced around there, but you get the point. Now they're going to begin to go up. The question is how much. We know that the buyers, homeowners who have mortgages have forbearance for a couple of months if they call their mortgage servicer up. They've got to call their mortgage servicer up, and they get 2 months. It depends. Some services are adding it on to the loan. Some are giving them 6 months to pay. Some are saying when you get government money for some reason, give us the money. It depends on the situation. But the government is trying to prevent wholesale foreclosures. On the rental side, Fannie and Freddie have said if you hold the paper on your residential property, rental property, if you give forbearance to the tenants, we'll give you forbearance on the mortgage. So everyone's doing their best here to keep tenants in their apartments, homeowners in their homes, and let them just wait a month or two out and see what happens. Get your job back and start paying again. No one wants a replay. No one wants to turn a healthcare crisis, which sort of morphed into a financial crisis, but the central bank and the Congress got involved. We don't want to see it turn into a real Main Street economic crisis. And there's lots of things stopping that from happening. That's why our recovery will start, in a couple of months, right? Last but not least, FICO scores were good before this began. We don't have a cohort of crummy buyers or crummy people who just bought a house. If you want to think about where the mortgage default rates are going to go bad, it's probably FHA, because they began to become the mortgage lender of the lender of last resort. And they're probably the canary in the mine shaft, if you ask me. Not sure yet. We'll see this unfold. I am nervous, but I am not scared. There's a big difference. Congress, the administration, the central bank are all doing everything they can. And the COVID problems are probably peaking out right about now. There'll be hotspots in Detroit, and New Orleans, and Miami, and Colorado, right? We're not done. But the worst is on the verge of getting over. It takes about 40 days for the problem to go away once it starts, and you clamp down hard. We clamped down on March 15th. By the end of April, it should be gone. And New York City, which began earlier, should see improvements earlier. As Tessa was kind enough to mention earlier on, I put out 70 words every day on economics. No graphs, no ads, no charts, no links, no photos. If you want it, you can go to my website, econ70.com, and sign up there. Or you can take your phone and text the word bow tie, imagine that, to the 5-digit number 22828. Again, 22828. Type in your email address, bow tie, no hyphen, no space, and you'll be prompted for an email address. You'll type it in, you'll hear from me every day till you die. I hope I've given you food for thought. I hope I've given you enough food for thought that you think about, hopefully, inviting me when conditions are better to actually give a in-person live speech. I now hope there's time, well, hope there's not, I'm joking. Hope there's time for Q&A where I can take some questions and answer some questions, and hopefully give you some insights that I didn't cover in my talk. Thank you very, very much.
We do have some questions. Can you hear me, Elliot?
I hear you perfectly, Marianne.
Okay. We have a question here. Do you think that there will be further boom in manufacturing, even larger than the trajectory we were on before, specifically with pharmaceuticals and medical equipment, since we are seeing clearly how dependent we are on foreign manufacturing for these crucial items?
I do. There's no question. I think that the trade war that Trump and China and Xi Jinping had caused a lot of indigestion in supply chain management. And this has just made that look like a party. That was just the appetizer. This is the main meal times 10. So there's suddenly a realization that when you really need something, you may not be able to get it. I mean, India and China supply all our medical devices and stuff, and we can't get it. Pharmaceutical drugs, as you mentioned, and so on. So I think that the notion is, yeah, I really do. I think there'll be some return of some stuff. I don't see a wholesale return. I mean, the labor costs there are much lower than they are here. We can't compete on making napkins or something, right? But on certain high-end stuff or certain essential stuff, I think supply chains are absolutely going to be rethought out. And this will hurt GDP growth because this is economically more efficient to do it this way until it's not. So yes, kudos for you, great question, and yes. But not as much as we might like, but more than there has been, yeah.
Great. Okay, with the unemployment rising so fast in the last 30 days, how will the market have a recovery with this many people without a job? And is this a good time for home buyers that are no longer focused on home buying?
Well, the unemployment rate's going to rise precipitously. And I think the market knows this. The market's seen, the market knows. The market saw last month job unemployment number for 700,000. That was just the tip of the iceberg because of the way the calendar, the week the question was asked by the government includes the week of the 12th, which was the first half of March, so that wasn't a good indicator. But we know unemployment's now already around 10%, maybe 11% by now, going up every day by a half a point, a quarter point. I mean, it's staggering amount. It'll stop soon, it ends. But the markets are future looking. They want to know what's coming around the corner. And if they start seeing good news there in Italy and Spain and so on, and Europe and New York, like Seattle, it's getting much better now. That will give them reason to be optimistic. And that will drive stock market prices higher. I think the question in the stock market is, has all the bad news come out? If it hasn't, the market can go lower. If it has, we've hit a bottom. You and I don't know the future like this. I don't know what the coronavirus is. I don't know if we're going to have a boomerang effect when we let people out of their office. It doesn't look like it's happened in other countries like South Korea and Taiwan a little bit and Singapore a little bit. So we don't know how long it'll take to come under control or go away. We don't know if we'll have a boom back in a month or two. Or how about in the fall, in late fall, November, December, when viruses come back? Will we have an uptick then? Will we have some sort of antidote by then? I don't know. Those are all answers. If the answer is yes to all these, if we're not going to have a boomerang and there'll be a vaccine in a few months, then the stock market will jump like crazy when that happens, right? Because the market's forward-looking. The past and the present are meaningless. So the high numbers of unemployment, unless they're worse than the market already is baked into the cake, won't have any impact. So if we have, next week, this week on Thursday, 3 million job losses or something, the market will shrug its head and move on. If it hits 10 or 12 million, that's a different story. That will be a negative surprise. Market falls.
Great, thank you. Can we take a few more? Yes, I think so. Where will home prices go during the next 3 to 6 months, and where do you see interest rates going? Staying where?
Interest rates are going to go nowhere. I think 30-year mortgages may actually decline slightly as this refi wave burns out. Suddenly, mortgage lenders will be less harassed, less overwhelmed. Financial conditions will improve, and as financial conditions improve, spreads between treasuries and mortgage-backed securities will return closer to their historical relationship. That will be good. Mortgage servicing rights will go up in value. Investors will be more willing to lend. Right? These warehouse lines will suddenly come back. Investors will take lower rates because they'll be more certain that the worst is behind, the recession's over. So I think that even though the central bank won't change rates, mortgage rates will probably fall a little bit, maybe 10, 20, 30 bips. That would be nice. And I think home prices shouldn't fall by much. If you look at the recession of 1990, it's a long time ago, but that was the last normal recession we had where housing wasn't the crux of the issue. Housing was just a side story then too. Housing prices fell 5, 6% or 4%, something like that. One of my slides, I show it. One of the last couple of slides, I show it. So I think that's more like this. I think we'll see a dramatic decline in activity more than we've ever seen before, but we won't see huge declines in price. I would be shocked if they exceeded 5 or 6%. I really would be shocked because you'd be getting the desperate sellers to drive that boat. And there are some. It depends. I mean, if they become a large percentage of total sales really decline and the desperate sales go up as a percentage of all sales, then you might get some weird numbers for a month. But I don't see this happening. I don't see the price declines.
Positive.
5-10% max. 10% max.
Right. Okay. And what could be any positive market adjustments possibly coming from the crisis? I guess that
Well, there's lots of positive stuff. I mean, look, the world's going to be a different place when we come out of this. As I mentioned, alluded to earlier, I'm sorry. We're going to be working from home more. We're going to have more telemedicine. We're going to have our groceries delivered. We're not going to want office space nearly as much. Criminals are going to have to change their MO. They're not going to be able to steal the handbags of old ladies because they're not going to be outside walking around. They'll be at home doing yoga and stuff like that because we've learned to live in our house, in our neighborhoods, and not go outside much. There's going to be some fundamental changing to how America operates. We're not going to be able to go into a store and touch the fruit anymore and squeeze the oranges or tomatoes. I think that's probably going to end to some extent. So there'll be all kinds of opportunities for new businesses and new tech to come out and do all kinds of interesting things. In the home selling industry, we're going to see all kinds of virtual tours and more of that stuff, and drive-by appraisals and automatic appraisals more than before, right? People say, it doesn't work. I don't believe in that. That's not good. Well, they worked for those 6 weeks. So that argument is over. We're living through an experiment, and there'll be changes, and in changes come all kinds of opportunities. And I can't even think of what half of them will be, of course. No one could have thought of Google or Amazon 20 years ago, right? Or Facebook.
Yeah, I think we could take a few more. The stimulus checks that are being sent to Americans are very small at best, and many people do live paycheck to paycheck. How is this going to affect and help with a quick recovery?
Well, okay, so the point that not only is the government giving the $1,200 to each person and $500 to a kid, so a household could pick up close to, I think, $500 for under 17 kids. That means a household with one kid could pick up almost $3,000. I mean, that's not a trivial amount of money. I mean, New York City is trivial, I get it. But outside New York and Los Angeles and San Francisco, that's a reasonable amount of money for 1 month anyways, for a month of expenses. And remember, they've taken unemployment duration, unemployment insurance, and taken it from what most states give, which is 26 weeks, and added on 50% more to get us to 39. And they've increased the amount of unemployment insurance by $600 a week. And the notion there was unemployment insurance covers about 2/3 of people's pay. So the extra $600 a week should make them whole, and maybe more so in some very low wage situations. So you're going to get 39 weeks of unemployment insurance with an extra fill-up of up to $2,500 a month on top of what the state's already giving you. So that should keep people who are destitute, who had a job, who now lose a job, should be reasonably well taken care of. And firms are furloughing their workers, covering their healthcare expenses, but letting them in turn claim unemployment insurance. And firms can get that Main Street money, or PPP, I forgot what the acronym stands for. But firms can get up to $350 billion collectively, small firms under 500 people, through the SBA. A local bank can do it for you through an SBA loan that's guaranteed, to help you keep your business open for 2 months, or alive for 2 months, paying your workers. So that when things return, you have your workers ready to go. They've been furloughed, or they're getting paid, or you pay your rent, so the landlord still loves you, or something, you paid half the rent. So between all these things, if this ends relatively soon, there'll be enough aid is the aim to keep the economy ready to go. Will we miss some people? Yeah. Will some firms go under? Yeah. Will some households go under? Yes. But not the majority. And hopefully in early May, things really start to turn around with vengeance. That's the hope. All these programs together, keep it together. And if we need more money, it gets prolonged, Congress can always give us $500 billion.
Yes. Do you think there will be a return of manufacturing making things in the U.S.?
Well, we've alluded to that a little bit earlier. And I think the answer is yeah, a little more than we have now. We're going to realize we need some certain industries are industry critical. They produce parts or materials or precursor agents that are absolutely critical that we cannot allow to be on foreign territory. You know, all kinds of pharmaceutical precursors that are made in China and India. They've closed down their borders. They won't let their stuff out of the country. You know, so all of a sudden, yeah, there'll be a little more. Supply chains are going to be rethought out, are going to be rethought. And that's part of the systematic change that this is bringing to the US economy and all other economies as well.
Thank you. Let's see. Is there any idea of assistance for commercial tenants whose business have been deemed non-essential?
I don't know about that. I know just about rentals for residential and homeowners for opportunity. I don't know. I would imagine, I shouldn't say, I don't know.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more. Do you think that the housing planning, like those being planned in suburban areas like Long Island, where there is a rise in more urban type housing, like apartment complexes versus single family homes, will be considered after seeing how much harder hit densely populated areas like New York City and LA were more highly impacted by the health crisis?
It's a great question. I think New York's a special place. I mean, you're New Yorkers. I don't have to tell you that. You know that. It's hard to recreate New York somewhere else. But other cities, like just a normal big city, fill in the blank, Indianapolis or Houston or something, that isn't inherently special. Don't tell that to people who come from there.
Mm-hmm.
They may have a harder time, but I think at the end of the day, people are going to want to live in New York City. They're going to want to live in San Francisco. There may be a small percentage that don't, and they'll move to suburbs, or more likely the exurbs, to get away from the whole density thing and have a little patch and grow eggplants or something like that, grow some vegetables. But I don't think we're going to see anything resembling a wholesale running to suburbia. I mean, for a few months, sure. But look at 9/11. What happened after 9/11? Life returned more or less. We have more security in airports, and that's about it. Once we get the vaccine and we know we can do it, I think we largely return to the way we were.
Mm-hmm.
In that respect, where we live. I mean, okay, I think Silicon Valley may have a hard time, because in Silicon Valley, there's no there. Santa Clara, San Jose isn't an interesting town. It's just a lot of jobs that are cool. But if you can work from home, you don't have to live there. But New York City has a vibrancy that no other city in America has. Chicago's got a cool vibrancy also. LA's got some nifty stuff going. These cities will, I don't think, experience anything profoundly different than what the path they were already on. Remember, New York State wasn't growing in population for the last 40 years, right? New York was the largest state in the country 40 years ago, and now they're the fourth largest.
Right.
California is almost double Texas and Florida.
Mm-hmm. Well, that brings us to 1 o'clock, and I want to thank you for your insight, invaluable information, Elliot. And can you just let us know how we can get your blog and information? Did you put that up for us?
That's the last slide. It's up. It's the last slide of the presentation. Again, if you want to get it, the easiest way, take your phone and open up a new text message. And the phone number is 22828, again, 22828. And the message, the body of the message is one word, bow tie, BOWTIE, no hyphen, no space. Send, and then it'll say, thank you for your interest. Please give me your email address. And you'll hear from me every night around 10, 11 o'clock East Coast time.
Okay, and this session was recorded, and we will have that on LIBOR's lirealtor.com/COVID hub page, where all of our webinars are recorded and listed there. Elliot, thank you so very much for your invaluable information, taking the time to answer member questions, and we look forward to our paths crossing again. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you very much, Marianne. It's a pleasure being here. I hope I've given you some insights. I look forward to next time already.
Yes, same here. Okay, bye-bye.